And then perhaps we can take some questions, and I'm happy to help facilitate that to ensure that everyone can hear. I'll repeat questions into a microphone, and we'll just let the conversation unfold as it will. Yeah? Okay.
Thank you, Pastor Heidi. And what a joy to be with you here at Grace again. I have been, I don't know if you know this, when I graduated from seminary, my first call was at Faith Lutheran in Brookfield, just down the street from here. And I used to come to Grace for different things, conferences and meetings, etc. So it is a joy to be with you back at this vibrant congregation. Thank you, Pastor Heidi, for your leadership and for your commitment to peace and justice around the world, which is very much needed. But before we go into who I am and what I do and all that, I wanted to say a big, huge thank yous to two dear friends, Linda and Ed. Where are you? See Ed? Yes. The lunch is delicious. Pastor Munther and I were commenting on the quality of the food, and it passed. So good job. It's Palestinian. Yeah. Yeah, it's better than Bethlehem. So my name is Gabi Aelabouni, and I'm currently, yes, a missionary with my wife Megan in Jerusalem. We live just outside the city of, or the old city of Jerusalem. By showing of hands, how many of you have been to the Holy Land before? Okay. You know that you are going again in 2024, correct? I'm just saying. But also, my work as a missionary is beyond what some of us think. Megan and I do not go out and try to convert Jews and Muslims to become Christians. That's not our work. And I know you know this, but it's a good reminder that we are, as I'm here speaking to you, that our missionary work happens in the spirit of accompaniment, which means really walking with people. And those are the things, that's the sentence that I still remember from Pastor Heidi when we did the interview. Pastor Heidi said, you know, you are going to be a missionary, and being a missionary means walking with people. And you told us the story about the road to Emmaus and how Jesus was walking alongside the people, telling them the good news. And that's what we are trying to do as ELCA missionaries, walking with the local leaders, such as the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, and with Pastor Munther and other pastors and other leaders in the community who are doing amazing work despite all the challenges that they are facing. And Pastor Munther will tell you more about it. Today, I serve as the director for the Middle East and North Africa desk on behalf of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in the US. And that is not Higgins Road. And I wanted to really stress this point, that when I say I am doing this work, I am doing this work on your behalf. That I am doing this work of accompaniment in the spirit of the brothers and sisters that we call ourselves the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, who sent me there to bring hope and to accompany and to walk with the local community. So for that, I am so grateful and thankful for your commitment here at Grace Lutheran, for your dedication to justice, especially when it comes to the Holy Land and when it comes to the Palestinian issues. Situation in Palestine, as you may heard and as you may know, is not that different from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Occupation still there. Palestinian people are still they are living under occupation. And that is a sin by itself, I would say. for a human being to be stripped of their dignity and be surrounded by a huge wall like a big prison and just feed them and give them, daily routines. That is absolutely the definition of occupation. I'm here, but I don't want it to go on and on. I think it is important today as we gather to really hear from Pastor Munther, who is not only a pastor, but he is an advocate for true justice and true peace for his people in Palestine. He's a vocal leader. He's a theologian, somebody that is very well respected. Pastor Munther, it is truly an honor to have you with us here in the U.S. and especially today at Grace Lutheran Church. And the floor is yours. Yes.
Good afternoon. Wow. Let's try that again. Too excited. Good afternoon. Again, it's so good to be here with you at Grace Lutheran. Thank you again for the invitation. Thank you, Sis Gabi, for the introduction. Although I want to disagree slightly with you in that things are not the same as they were 5 years ago. If we're honest, things are worse than they were 5 years ago. In fact, if there is anything that we can say with confidence about where I come from, is that according to the pattern, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And that's why, one of the things we always say, we cannot lie to our children and we cannot promise them that things are gonna be better. Instead, what we can do is work for a better future together with our neighbors and with all those who pursue peace and justice. And that's why, to us, our existence there as a church is not just we're there because, coincidence, but we really believe that we are called to be there at such times because we have a message and we have a calling to stay there. Many of us who serve there or who live there, Palestine is my home. My family goes hundreds of years back to where I come from, in Palestine, Beit Sahur, the Shepherd's Field. But we're there now because we decided to stay. And we decided that we are called to spread and to keep the witness, to continue the message that started in our land 2,000 years ago. So today we are honored and privileged to continue that message that began in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. It's not easy. We accept that burden with humility, and we're grateful for our partners around the world who accompany us in this journey. I'm not sure how much you know about our context. Today, as a Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, we are part of the ELC JHL. We are 6 congregations, 5 in Palestine, 1 in Bethlehem. The number of Christians in the Holy Land is not that big anyways, around 180,000. In the occupied territories, we are around 45,000 Palestinians, among a majority of Muslims on one side of the divide, and then 120,000 among a majority of Jews on the other side of the divide. It's not easy to live in such a context. It's not easy because of the difficult political reality, a reality that is now more and more described, not by Palestinians. We've been saying it's apartheid for years, but it's described by respected human rights organizations like Amnesty International, like Human Rights Watch, like B'Tselem, an Israeli Jewish human rights organization, by the Harvard School of Law, by the United Nations, and yes, more recently by the PCUSA, as an apartheid. And it's not meant to demonize the state of Israel. It's really meant to state the facts and to lobby people to end that current status quo, because this current status quo is not sustainable for both Palestinians and Israelis. This is not God's design for humanity, to live in separation and to live in a state in which some have more rights than the others. Constituted in the Constitution, they have more rights than the other, where some control the others, where some are more privileged, some have, and I can give multiple examples. And sadly, after many years, people give up and leave. I come from, I pastor Christmas Lutheran Church. Right now, I think we are around 160 members. Our members who live in the United States are probably much more than those who are in Bethlehem. People have given up, unfortunately, over the years, or I don't want to say given up, but I can't blame people for seeking a better future elsewhere. And that's our biggest fear, is a Bethlehem without Christians. But enough about the difficult situation, because we're not here to talk about ourselves as victims, because it's much more than that. And I would like to share just about my church, Christmas Lutheran Church. How many of you have been to Christmas Lutheran? So I look forward to welcome you again in January of 2024. How's that? A church at the heart of Bethlehem. And I think our church illustrates what I mean about mission and why we are needed in our region and our country. A small church, yet out of that church, when I think of the things we've done, that church has done over the last 30, 40 years, I'm just amazed. Our small church oversees a high school, Dar al-Kalima school. We have more than 400 students, the majority of whom, by the way, are Muslims, but are, it's an excellent, place for not just education, but coexistence between Palestinians and Muslims. In our basement, a few years ago, we started a community cultural center, training center. My predecessor, many of you know Mitri Rahib, and out of that small movement, now we have a university, believe it or not. It's the only specialized university in culture and arts. We have a big campus in Bethlehem, hundreds of students. If you know more, Bright Stars of Bethlehem are here, and they can tell you more about the wonderful ministry of Dar al-Kalima University. Our church has hosted many conferences over the years. We have been advocates on behalf of our people. We have wonderful ministries, normal church ministries, youth and children and women, but also ministries for the community as well. And again, if you think of our story as an example, a small church in Bethlehem, yet we're not sitting in Bethlehem complaining about the situation and lamenting our fact, but our lament has been translated into hope, into action, into ministry to our community and to those around us. And that story is not just our story, but the story of the Palestinian church. Today, Palestinian Christians, even though we are 1% of the Palestinian people, yet we are responsible for, we are playing a leading role in our society, whether in education, whether in the health sector. So many hospitals and clinics are Christian, so many schools are Christian, so many universities are Christians. A big number, more than around 50% of all non-governmental organizations that are involved in development and charity and human rights are either supported by the church or directly related to the church. So yes, we are a small number, but believe me, we are playing a very leading role in our society. Our existence as Christians in a society that's predominantly Muslim is hugely important for our society, for the health of our society, and we're doing well. I mean, our relationship with our Muslim neighbor can't be better. It's really well. And again, I encourage you, and I'd be more than happy to feature some questions. When you hear of Palestine or the Palestinian situation, I ask this question in the sermon: what is the first thing that comes to mind? And I hope that not just for you, but spread the word that the first thing that should come to mind are ministries like ours, are people like our students, Dar Al Kalima students, who are engaged in culture, in arts, who are doing the good work on the ground. The ministry that I mentioned of Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, whether it's our environmental ministry, the Gender Justice Desk, who are doing an amazing job in the last few years. Our schools, the Augusta Victoria Hospital, just keep in mind, there is a lot of good work happening back in Palestine. And as Lutheran, you can be part of this. And you can proudly say, our sister church in Palestine is involved in such amazing ministries. So thank you again. And I don't know if we can hold some questions. I think that's the design.
Thank you. Thanks, Pastor Munther. Bishop Azar always says, and hopefully at the end we can show a short video about the ELCGHL. But he always says, we're not just a church, we are a reforming church. And that's true. I think what Pastor Munther and I are witnessing and what we are seeing, that the church is a reforming church, always trying to be a lead in their community despite all the challenges that they are facing. They are a light to the world. And also in our work of accompaniment as an ELCA community, I wish I can hold people's hand and say, okay, let me share with you what I see every day. Because it's very hard, very, very easy to focus on the negative. It's very easy to focus on the situation, the political situation, on the losing the land, the settlements and all that. And it's very hard to focus on really what's happening deep down with these communities. So what Pastor Munther shared with you is really a glimpse of what is happening in the church, and especially the Lutheran Church in the Holy Land, in Jordan and the Holy Land. So we are here for questions. So please ask Pastor Munther all the question you want.
Thank you, friends. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, I'm just going to, assuming we don't get feedback, we'll let you ask your own questions.
If this is too sensitive a question, let me know. But I'm wondering if the church is playing any kind of leadership role in the politics, in the government of the Palestinians, of the Fatah or the PLO.
Yeah. So does the ELCGHL play any important role in the government of the Palestinian Authority?
The church has a close relationship with the Palestinian leadership, especially on issues related to church life and church matters, church property. And the Palestinian Authority is actually very friendly towards the Christian presence. They have implemented laws that, for example, the mayors of 10 Palestinian towns and cities by law have to be Christians, including the mayors of Ramallah, the mayor of Bethlehem. And this guarantees that we are always represented, we're always heard, and we're always involved. On the government level, many leading politicians are Christians. They're representing themselves. They're not like, members of a Christian party. We don't have that. But a lot of leading Palestinian politicians, up in front and behind the scenes, are Christians. And in many ways, many times, the Palestinian Authority consults church leaders, even on issues related to politics and to the current situation.
Yeah. Hadi, there is one more question. And also, while we are getting the next question, I wanted to highlight that the ELCGHL as a church, as an entity, is dealing with 3 different systems, government systems. So they have congregations in Jordan, and that's the Jordanian government, you have in Jerusalem, and that's under the Israeli government, and you have the congregations in the West Bank, and that's under the Palestinian Authority. And each government has its own challenges, I would say. So, which make things a little bit even, things harder on the church as a whole as they move forward.
So this is also probably a political question, but I'm a political animal. And, you know, I know Israel closed down. They shuttered 6 human rights organizations. And I'm a partisan. I should tell you, I'm a member of Chicago Faith Coalition. We closely support American Friends Service Committee. So the No Way to Treat a Child campaign was an AFSC campaign to help put the spotlight on children that were being arrested and militarily detained. What, if anything, can the church or can we as supporting the church do? Because I know Defense for Children International represented some of those children. Adamir had a hand with some of those children. I know other people are being affected, but particularly with the children, what can or are we doing in light of what Israel has done in terms of the organizations that have worked with children?
Yeah, thank you. And just for information, one of the most leading voices in Defense for Children International and the Palestinian branch, who founded the Palestinian branch, is a Lutheran. And that's another example of our involvement in the civil society. Yeah, Rifat Qassis. For those who are not aware of what we're talking about, Israel has been on a big campaign in the last year against, they've selected the 6 most prominent Palestinian human rights organizations and declared war upon them by making completely baseless claims that they are terrorist organizations. And when I say completely baseless, I mean, even the Europeans who, you know, they had to do it for their own, decided to conduct their own investigation. They challenged Israel, that's the proof, and after a while said there is no proof whatsoever that these organizations are involved in anything or remotely involved in anything. But it's clear what's happening. Israel wants to silence these organizations. Many of them have been very critical, of course, of Israel and, by the way, of the Palestinian Authority, which is, you know, important to keep in mind. So these are not just organizations promoted, you know, specialized in propaganda against Israel. They have been very critical of the Palestinian Authority as well. Well respected. I have very high regard to all 6 these organizations. But sadly, you know, they eventually, you know, Israel continued its battle on them, eventually closing. And 3-4 days ago, in the middle of the night, breaking into their offices, confiscating everything, making sure they cannot continue their work. What's really scandalous in all of this, in so many elements, is that Israel has the audacity to claim that they decide who's terrorist and who's not. It's just, I cannot believe this, you know. A country that bombs, you know, masses of people, declares itself as the referee of the world to decide this is terrorist and this is not. Second, these are organizations in the Palestinian territories. They're not under any Israeli law. The problem is now Israel feels they can do what they can because they can get away with it. And people are tired with words of solidarity and we stand with you because, you know, words are falling short. And so what can be done, I think, I mean, yes, we need to show support to these organizations because to me, what these organizations represent is not just their work, but they represent the whole civil society. If that collapses, then we're doomed, believe me, as a Palestinian society. So there is so much at stake when it comes to these 6 organizations. I urge you, speak to your government officials, write them, nag on them that what's happening, because everybody knows these are baseless, completely baseless claims. Everybody knows that. So speak to your authorities, speak to your government representatives, make your voices heard that what is happening is unacceptable because Again, I'll put it in a very simple words. Israel does what it does because they can get away with it. Nobody is holding Israel accountable while the church is debating, is it appropriate to call Israel this or that? We want to be diplomatic, and Israel, doesn't care. They're doing what they want. And we are the ones who are soft and care. I hope you get this.
Other questions?
Yes, one here, and then we'll come to you, David, and then over here.
A follow-up question to the one about the human rights organizations. On the same evening that the 6 or 7 human rights organizations were invaded in Ramallah, an Anglican church, St. Andrews, was also invaded, and a lot of damage was done. So I'd like your comments on how Israel is treating the Christian churches in Jerusalem and on the West Bank.
I will try, yes, to answer that question. The churches in Jerusalem have been under a lot of pressure from the Israeli government. And I will get to your point. But also, I don't know if you saw the letter that came out last December from the head of churches in Jerusalem, condemning radical Jewish groups who have been attacking priests and churches and church properties all over Jerusalem and all over the Holy Land. It is happening. And while on the surface it says, the Israeli government says, no, we guarantee freedom of worship to everybody, and we support churches and church leaders. Also, you probably heard about what happened on Easter when the Orthodox Church had this, big fire. It's called the fire celebration, the Holy Fire celebration on Saturday. And, around the same time that the city was celebrating Ramadan, and it was also celebrating Pesach, the Jewish holiday. And there were no restrictions at all for people to go to the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall. People can freely go in and out. And the same thing happened on the, at the Aqsa. But when it came to the Holy Fire, they restricted access mainly for the Christian community who lives in Jerusalem and around the whole land. I saw it where the police officer took a chair, stood up on it and said, listen, if you speak English and you are a tourist, you stand in this line. And if you, an Arabic-speaking Christian, you stand on this line. And he said, you tourists can go in. You Palestinians, Christians, you are not allowed, go home. Where are these things happening these days anywhere around the world? We talk about the Arab world. The Arab world has a lot of respect for Christians too. But now we are talking about the holy city for all people. And for you to say, no, you are allowed to go and you are not allowed to go. You, because who you are, your identity, these people have been Christians. Sometimes they ask me, well, when did I convert to Christianity? And I tell them about 2,000 years ago. These people that were standing in line have been Christians for about 2,000 years. So just to answer the question, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. I would have hoped something like the Holy Spirit would have worked differently, and sometimes I have many hopes. But I hope that these Christians, pilgrims who came to go to the Holy Land, they could have stood up and said, enough is enough. What you are doing is not right. but not one voice came out of the crowd and condemned what was happening. And you do not know how much power the church has and how much power you have as an American. You have a lot of privilege when it comes to issues related to Israel and Palestine. Your passport, your identity trumps. Oh, I just wanted to check something here. So, but it's serious. I think don't underestimate your power as people who speak for justice, like people who speak on behalf of the powerless. You have power to make a difference. Use it. And use it for good. And speak up. And yes, we are not speaking enough. I am also, now I'm speaking not an ELCA, I'm speaking now as a Palestinian. I'm tired of statements. If I hear or see another statement, I'll fall apart. Because we're talking about people's lives, about children dying, about family being separated from each other just because they are labeled as Palestinians. And we are silent. It's not my fault. He asked me to speak, so I'm speaking. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You've really already answered my question. My question was how can how can Israel do whatever it wants, no matter what anybody else does? It's because of the United States. The United States stands behind Israel no matter what. Christians in this country are the ones who support Israel more than anybody else, and this is the problem. And you've already answered that. You've already answered that question pretty well, and so I don't really have anything to ask you.
I agree.
This is another political question. Is there a feeling among Palestinians that the only way out of this is to have a common country, forget this two-state solution, because as the settlements increase, the scales continue to tip in the wrong way. And eventually, they will have almost the whole West Bank. What's the feeling among any Palestinians who still have hope for the future?
You're right in the sense that the prospects of two-state solution have pretty much gone. I've been hearing the phrase that the two-state solution is dying for the last 25 years or so. So it's been dying for a long time. I don't know, when are we ready to declare it as the biggest tragedy is the absence of an alternative. So when people say the two-state solution is dead, so what's the alternative? And we're not hearing any words of a one state. The one state is just a novelty in the minds of intellectuals and some dreamers. And we cannot let that dream distract us from the current reality. And that's my fear, is that the only alternative to the two-state solution, which everybody knows is dead, is the current status quo in which we're stuck. We're stuck in a reality in which it's a one-state apartheid. You cannot describe it in any other way. Palestinians only control their cities. We're confined within the cities. Israel controls everything outside of the cities. I mean, the West Bank is already with Israel. Even by the Oslo Accord, 74% of the West Bank was declared Area C, which remained with Israel. We cannot build, we cannot expand. We can only build and expand on 4% of the West Bank, which is 4% of the 20%. So we have nothing left. Demographically, we're crowded within. Israel controls the entrances and exits of our cities. We are gated communities. And that's the only alternative. The Palestinian Authority cannot dismantle itself, otherwise there will be chaos. And Israel has created this system in which, you know, someone else runs the occupation on their behalf. We know this. So what's the way out? That's the challenge, and that's where we need people to speak up and to put pressure to end this. My biggest fear, I mean, we can continue to dream about the one state, we can write about it, whatever we want. My biggest fear is that this current status quo will one day explode, for the lack of a better word. And the consequences will be tragic because it is not viable, it is not human. Nobody will continue to accept to live in such unjust situation. Eventually, people will rise up again for their freedom. And I hope it doesn't happen in a violent way. Nobody likes violence, but this is where we're heading, and that's my fear.
Yeah, and also I wanted to add one more sentence to that every time I hear about is it a viable solution, and the issue of settlements comes up, we always look at it as if the settlements is, and we talk about it too in this way, that the settlements are the Palestinians' problem. And in my opinion, the issue of settlements is that it shouldn't be, and it's not the Palestinian problem. It's the Israeli problem. They built it. So if there are serious solutions, the Palestinians shouldn't be the ones to decide, oh, what should we do with those settlements, or where those settlements should go. Am I clear? They built it. They should deal with it. But in order for true peace to happen, I don't foresee this happening only by having the Israelis and the Palestinians sit around the table and come to a solution. It needs pressure. It needs power. I also say money talks. You know, 4 billion, you mean? Yeah, yeah, sure. But yeah, I will stop here.
I was wondering, first of all, if you can say what the ethnic demographic maybe is of the church group, and also what kind of efforts or possibly hope is there for things in the church as far as interfaith collaborations and relationships and interethnic, because I know that's a lot of the definition of the divisions as well.
Go ahead, yeah, and then I will add a few things.
We're Arabs, we're Palestinians. It's not an ethnicity. Palestinianism is not an ethnicity. Even to be an Arab is not an ethnicity. That's a mistake a lot of people make. We are a mixture of ethnicities. As Arabs, as Palestinians, the majority of Arabs are actually, became Arabized at one point or another, because Arabism is a nationality, is a feeling, is a language that unites all of us. So this idea of multi-ethnic is not really accurate in our context, by the way. We are Palestinians. That's the context in which we work. And in terms of inter-religious conversations, our church is doing much on both sides, Christian-Jewish dialogue and Christian-Muslim dialogue, more so with our Muslim neighbors because we live with them. And with our Muslim neighbors, it's not as if it comes as programs or encounters or let's have a conference, because it's natural. As I said, they are classmates, they are business partners, they are neighbors, we play together. But maybe just to highlight one program we do at our church, especially in our schools that I had the privilege in working at. By the Palestinian system, all students must take religious education as part of the school system education from the 1st grade to the 12th grade. 3 lessons per week. It's an extensive program. There is a curriculum for Muslims and that for Christians. So students are together the whole time. When it comes for religious education, Muslims go alone and Christians go alone. And we've discovered over the years that, what message are we sending when we say we're one in everything, but when it comes to religion, we cannot get together. And besides, probably children are guessing what are they saying about us, and those are saying what are they saying about us. So at our Lutheran schools, we created a curriculum from the 1st to the 12th grade, where once a month, it's a joint religious education class given by the 2 teachers, the Muslim and the Christian, on a topic in which we talk about how do Muslims see it, how do Christians see it, how are we different, how are we similar. This month, let's go visit a church together. The next month, let's go visit a mosque together. And we're building this concept among our students in which, yes, we're different, but we can, and we should learn and live together and so on. So that's one program we're doing at our church to face that, to do something about, living with a Muslim majority. And as I said, we do some theological engagements with some Jewish groups in Jerusalem once a year. Yeah.
I'm going to take the privilege of a final question before we hear from Bishop Azar via video. I served as a missionary in Latin America, so forgive the Che Guevara reference, but Che Guevara talked about every revolutionary movement being born out of deep love. And I'm wondering if one or both of you might share a story from your ministries that would help us understand the kind of love that fuels your commitment to remaining in Palestine, to getting up the next day, to continuing this fight, and to continuing in the path of Jesus, whatever that means for your context. Is there a story you might share with us that would help us understand the love that fuels you?
Yes. So, I have 3 kids, as I shared in my sermon. Not my sermon, my children's sermon. Thank you. And so we are living as a family in Jerusalem, far away from. So I was born and raised in Palestine to a Palestinian family, living in the Galilee region near Nazareth. But for when I got married and we had the kids, my kids and I would talk about going to see their grandparents, Sido and Tita. They didn't know much about where I came from. They didn't know much about the culture other than what I told them. And then we made that decision to go as missionaries to Jerusalem. And as we arrived there, I was nervous. I didn't know what to expect. These are 3 kids who were born and raised in the U.S., went to very American schools, living in the kind of middle, upper class, and going to Jerusalem with my family. It has been a joy to see how our kids have been transformed. But this is not the story. The story is not about my kids. The story is about the Palestinian kids that my children have called them friends and brothers and sisters. There's a child, his name is Wasim. And when Wasim lives in Beit Sahur, and he is one of Ethan's, my son's oldest son, best friends. And when we go to see Wasim, it's amazing how these kids open their arms and welcome our kids and include them in everything that they do. Wasim is not able to visit Ethan in Jerusalem, but Ethan is able to visit Wasim in Beit Sahur. And every time we see Wasim and his family, the kids ask me, when is the next time Wasim is going to come and visit us in Jerusalem? That is the story of the kids, the children that live beyond or behind the wall. This is what my kids are witnessing. But this story of Wasim and my children gives me hope because I can't be silent. I can't stop sharing, not because I'm Palestinian, because of the injustices that are happening to these children. You know, the children that are growing up feeling that they don't have hope from young age, that they don't have future, that they don't have anything to contribute, that they are not good enough because of where they live. So Wasim's story is my driving force to work for justice, for accompaniment, to believe in leaders like Pastor Munther and others. We're talking about humans' lives. We're talking about people that are growing up feeling powerless. But I also believe that the God who healed the sick, the Prince of Peace, is still active and alive and working for just peace for all. So, thank you.
Love as the force behind the revolutions, right? Interesting. I can always trace my calling to go to ministry back to checkpoints. When I used to stand for long hours as a student in university, in the heat of the sun, we're being delayed, sometimes humiliated for no reason. We knew it. And I often, I always say I battled hate within myself and ask myself, how can I, fight hatred towards the other? And I looked around and I said, how do others do this? I must do something. I must do something. And what do I know? I went to seminary to do something. I don't know if that's the right choice or not. That's the only thing that came to mind, honestly. Over the years, this whole thing of love, especially love to the enemy, has challenged me. It challenged me especially when I was in encounters with Israelis, to challenge them, to talk to them, to, those who know me know how sometimes I can be too confronting, but sometimes, I just love to listen. And to see also, when I heard about stories of young Israeli teenagers who went to the army and who also stood, on checkpoints for many hours and hated what they were doing. And of course, there is no comparison between the suffering of both peoples, between an oppressor and an oppressed. But it was then that I began to realize that even the Israelis need liberation. They themselves need liberation, again, on a different level completely. And as such, I was very moved and influenced by the Kairos Palestine document. If you heard about it, I'm sure you did, which sets the concept of resistance to the evil of the occupation in the context of love. So they have a section on love, and in that section they talk about resistance as a duty of the Christian, in which, in that logic of love, when we resist, we seek to liberate both the Palestinian but also the Israeli, because God's image is deprived in both when we do such bad things. And as such, we resist not because we hate, we resist not because we want to seek revenge, but we resist because, as the last song says, we want to teach, we want to turn our enemies into friends. And that's what the Sermon of the Mountain teaches us to do. That's what Christ challenges us to do. You cannot resist the occupation out of hatred or out of just anger or resentment, but you always need to think of the end results. The end result to me, ending the occupation cannot be the goal. That's only the first step. I want my kids one day to be able, and maybe to be more realistic, maybe my grandkids one day to be able to have Israeli friends and live next door to them. That's the goal, that's what we work for, and that's what love teaches me to work for. Not just to end the occupation, but ending the occupation is the first step. Let's be real, but that cannot be the end goal.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We have a video from Bishop Azar and ELCGHL that we would like to show you. Bishop Azar is the Bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan in the Holy Land. He has been the bishop for the last 3.5 years or so, 4 years. I would leave you to hear what he has to say and what other pastors of the ELCGHL have to say about their work and ministry. It's a short video, and we'll end with that.
To find Jesus. The Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, our church, belongs to a community of Palestinians.
Evangelical Lutheran Church of the Reformation here in Beit Jala.
My name is Rodney Saeed. I am the pastor at Hope Evangelical Lutheran Church in Ramallah, and I'm also the youth pastor at the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land.
I'm Ahmed Hamdan. I'm the pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Church, the Shepherd, in Amman, Jordan.
My name is Munther and I am the pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem. And I'm also the pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Beit Sahel.
My name is Pastor Farsan Zahd. I'm the pastor of the Arabic-speaking congregation of the Church of Redeemer in the Old City of Jerusalem.
Being a pastor here in Palestine is more than just serving. It's a way of living and a way of resistance.
I'm very privileged to be the pastor of this unique church, a very committed congregation.
We try to be just like the bishop, in the community, with the community, and for the community.
Here, a lot of people are broken, they are suffering. And it's really important to walk with each other on this journey together.
When I think of all the difficulties in our land and all of the despair, and then I come to our church and see these young people coming and exercising and doing projects and planning things, I am reminded of hope and the opportunities for life that we have in this land.
My role is to help my congregation to discern Christ in the midst of crisis.
Especially youth here in Palestine. Being with them, it's always a joy. I see a future I see a way, a life for our church and for our society.
The church is not just stones and buildings. We are the church, the people, the body of Christ, the living stones. We are living in a very challenging situation, both as Palestinians and as Christians. But God is also bringing new life to the living stones of the Holy Land through children who are learning in our schools.
My name is Anton Nassar. I am the principal of Dar al-Kalima Lutheran School in Bethlehem.
My name is Georgette Hasboul Rawati. I'm the principal of Beit Sahwoud School.
Guten Tag. My name is Matthias Wolf. I'm the principal of Talita Kumi in Beit Jala.
As a principal of the Lutheran School, it's really important to have students from different backgrounds.
Students who enter our school when they are 3 years old and they graduate when they are 18 years old. So the school is kind of their second home.
Lutheran values means we really put an emphasis on Christian education, which is so essential for the youth in the Holy Land.
I believe as a Lutheran principal to work on create a new generation, to work to create new leaders in the community, open-minded, respect others, values that they grow up on it, especially value of love.
To our environmental ministers who teach us to care for the land and much more.
My name is Simon Awad, Executive Director of the Environmental Education Center. Our mission is to care for creation, raising awareness for the public and the students in schools to be aware of protection of nature.
And our diabolical ministry to care for our neighbors.
My name is Rana Zidan. I'm from Beit Jala. I'm the director of the Diaconal Center of the ELCJHL. The Diaconal Ministry is an exciting ministry in the ELCJHL. With this ministry, we serve those who in need in our community with help paying medical fees, school fees, and offering counseling.
To women who are leading our gender justice ministry.
My name is Ranana Isa, and I'm the Gender Justice Program Manager at the ELCJHL. The Women's Ministry is one of the most important ministries of ELCJHL. We hope to empower women so that they are able to reach leadership positions in their home, society, and in the church.
I really like how Lutherans are very open to accepting anyone, and they don't really have any discrimination against pupils. And there's a lot of stereotypical things that are said about Lutherans, like we don't believe in certain things, or we're not really Christian, when we just simply have difference of showing that we're Christian.
The church is the people. This is what we want to tell the world, that the church is alive, living, the true living stones.
We are one with you in the body of Christ. We invite you all to come and see.
God bless you, and I hope to see you here in Israel.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Pastor Heidi, thank you for your leadership and your hospitality. Grace Lutheran, come and see. We hope to see you soon. Also, by your presence, you give hope to the Christian community in the Holy Land just by coming and listening and hearing their stories and joining them, on their journey of doing ministry in their community. So come and see, as Bishop also said, there's a lot to see. Thanks be to God for that. And thanks be to God for you.
Thank you, Pastor Gabi, Pastor Munther. Please do carry our love, our solidarity, our openness to be transformed back to our brothers and sisters, our siblings in the ELCJHL. Thanks to each of you for being here. Feel free to mingle for a few more minutes if you don't mind taking care of the remainders of your food, and use trash cans and available things around here to just help us with cleanup. We'd be very grateful. Thank you. God bless you.